guys, welcome to Books and BlueStockings. I'm Betty Bookworm and I read way too much into things. Quick, picture a witch in your head. Are you picturing a scary lady stooped over a cauldron? A Puritan woman being burned at the stake? An ugly crone eating children? Or maybe a sisterhood of women joining together? Why do we picture witches this way? And where did these pictures come from? The witch figure has been used in literature for thousands of years. There's even a witch in the Bible. And over the years, we have seen a shift in the witch archetype from dark demonic harpy to a symbol of female empowerment. But what caused the shift? Now, I could go on and on about every witch portrayal in literature and cinema, but then we'd get like a 2-hour-long video. So why don't we begin with one of the earliest examples of witches that most of us remember? The Evil Queen in Snow White. The Evil Queen is portrayed as a crone for the last part of the story. She becomes a crone after growing jealous of her beautiful stepdaughter Snow White and proceeds to poison her. And it's no coincidence that the queen is portrayed as a crone. The crone is part of the triple goddess symbol consisting of maiden, mother, and you guessed it, crone. It is believed that the symbol represents women throughout all stages of their life. The story of Snow White pits crone against maiden, pits old women against young women. It sends the message that young, nubile, and virginal women are the ideal, while older women are evil, jealous witches. And inversely, that witches are just old, jealous women. Now let's fast forward 30 or 40 years and talk about Bewitched. I mentioned last year that I was never quite a fan of this show. It's about a strong, sensible woman named Samantha who has what several women coming out of the 1950s felt like they lacked: agency over themselves and power. And what does she do with it? Abandons it to become a housewife. Not that there is anything wrong with being a housewife, but she gives up her incredible power and life to become a housewife to the worst human being possible, Darren. Darren is not kind or smart or even decent. He is a belittling piece of human excrement. Seriously, Samantha, why? Now, I've read articles saying that there were feminist subtexts in the show, and I can see how there could be. I mean, Elizabeth Montgomery was a supporter of the women's movement. But this show was created, produced, and directed solely by men during a decade when second-wave feminism was chipping away at the 1950s patriarchal status quo. I mean, if this show was trying to equate female empowerment with witchcraft just to have Samantha squelch her power to appease her awful, awful husband, then I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. If the show was trying to be feminist, it failed. Now let's fast forward about 20 years. Now, I was born in the 90s, so I can't be sure, but I think some god of testosterone descended from the heavens and banged a decade and created the 1980s. Maybe it was an extreme response to the feminism of the 60s and 70s, but the 80s had an overdose of masculinity. Not that there's anything wrong with masculinity, it's just there needs to be a balance, masculine, feminine. And the 80s seemed to have a disdain for the feminine. And this disdain was subtly expressed in the two witch movies, The Witches and Teen Witch. The witches portray, the witches as ugly old hags, again going back to the crone hate, who despise children and want all children dead. Because all-powerful women must hate children, I will refrain from making the obvious correlation in these times of political unrest. Teen Witch is horrible in that it equates witchcraft and female empowerment with entitled narcissism and immaturity. Louise taps into her natural magic and harnesses her abilities. Why? For a boy, of course. And not just any boy. The cutest and most popular 30-year-old at her high school. And once she gets the penis, boyfriend, what does she do with her power? Throws it all away, of course. What does she need with all that agency and opportunity now that she has her high school romance? But wait! I'm a child of the 90s. These aren't the witches I grew up with. The witches I grew up with were fantastical and colorful and loving and strong. They focused on sisterhood and slapstick female-driven humor. And they didn't lament that they were outcasts. They wore that shit as a badge of honor. So what happened? Third wave feminism, of course. The 90s were a time of Lilith Fair and riot girls and realizing that it wasn't okay to sexually harass in the workplace, and it wasn't okay for a president to use his power to sexually manipulate interns. We learned that it was okay for women to celebrate themselves as women. That's why a female-driven comedy like Hocus Pocus is important. And that's why the sisterhood portrayed in Practical Magic is important. And that's why the deviation from the norm as seen in The Craft is important. These are the witches that I grew up with, and these are the witches that I'm grateful for. Except Nancy. That bitch cray. Thanks for watching. I'm Betty Bookworm, and I put a spell on you. And now you're mine.